In this video, I'm going to talk about how to reach out to your dismissive avoidant ex. This video is specifically for you if you've been reading up a lot about attachment styles, about relationships, and now you're looking back at your connection and you wish that you could have done a little bit better. Maybe you were really critical, or maybe you didn't acknowledge the dismissive avoidant for all the positive things that they brought to the relationship. This video is for you if you're ready to take responsibility for your part and reach out to either make amends or to open the door for the possibility of another connection with your DA. Hi, I'm Katya Morozova. I am a personal and relationship coach for people who are ready to heal their relationship wounds, feel secure in their skin, and have healthy relationships. I'm also the founder of KatyaMorozova.me. If you're new to my channel and you haven't yet subscribed and you want to watch more videos that support you in healing from your breakup, learning about your attachment style and the attachment style of your ex, and finally having healthy relationships in your life that last, then definitely subscribe to my channel. So again, I want to preface this video with who this video is for. This is for you if maybe you're an anxious, preoccupied style partner and you've learned that about yourself recently and you realize that you were using a lot of hyperactivating strategies in your relationship with your DA. Maybe you were overly critical, overly clingy, generally didn't give the dismissive avoidant a lot of space in the relationship to exist, to be themselves, and to also have the relationship on their terms as well as on your terms. Now, I say this not to absolve your dismissive avoidant partner of their role in the relationship, but rather I recommend that you use the tips that I'm about to give you if you really feel like you are ready to take responsibility for your role in the relationship, and if you genuinely feel like you could have had something really great together. And given another shot, you could come back together in a much healthier type of dynamic. Now, one more thing before we get into the tips, and this is really important before you use these tips that I'm about to share with you, and that is if you have already profusely apologized for your role in the relationship or apologized for something that you said or did, I wouldn't continue on trying to reach out to your partner in this manner. If they are closed off from you making amends with them, then they are not in a position to hear you right now. And I would wait till you use this strategy until later in time when they have had some time to think about the past, to process the relationship, and they have come out of deactivation. Because if you've apologized once and they didn't hear you, well, the likelihood that if you apologize or take responsibility for something again, that they would hear you this time is probably slim to none. So with all of that said, let's get into the tips on how to reach out. Now, the first step to this process is choosing the mode of communication that you would like to use to reach out to your ex. This could be in the form of an email, a letter, or a text. So use the mode of communication that you feel most comfortable with and that I would say gives your ex the best chance to kind of reach out on their own terms. So for me, if I was going to do something like this, I might send an email or a letter versus a text message, because if you send a text message, there's kind of this like immediate pressure to respond. That's just me, that's my style of communication, but do what's best for you and also what's best for your ex, and choose the mode of communication where you think they're going to be the most receptive as well. Step number 2 is a very simple point, but it's actually a really important one, and it may be one of the reasons why a lot of times a dismissive avoidant won't respond to a communication, and that is the length of your communication. So if you send a very long letter rehashing every single bit of your relationship, trying to make amends for every single little piece, or kind of processing in your letter, processing your emotions, then the likelihood that your dismissive avoidant is going to respond, I would say, is lower. And that might not be because they don't care, but it might just be because they're overwhelmed by your communication. We do know this about dismissive avoidance, that they can be overwhelmed by too much emotional communication. Now, I know that dismissive avoidants get a really bad rap for this, but the reality is that it's not just a choice. It's often how their brains become wired through their attachment style. Anxious preoccupieds are actually more keen to pick up emotional information in their environment. And oftentimes anxious preoccupieds actually will omit a lot of information type content, whereas dismissive avoidants operate in the opposite way, where they pick up a lot of information, but they don't pick up on as much emotion. So the reason I say this is that you just want to take this into consideration when you reach out to your dismissive avoidant, because it's not really personal. It's, they're not actively trying to be overwhelmed by emotional communication. It's just that different people have a different capacity for the amount of emotional communication that they can process. So with that said, the second step is keep it short, keep it concise, and keep it to the point. The third step is really a little bit of a copywriting trick. So if you want to capture their attention early on in your message, then let them know that you've been doing some thinking and that you've come to some realizations about the role that you've played in your relationship. The reason for this step is that anytime you're communicating something that feels important or potentially heavy, no matter who you're communicating it to, you really want to enter into the conversation slowly and give the other person a moment to process that you're about to share something that's important. So let them know that you've come to some realizations about the relationship. This is an important step because it's going to disarm your dismissive avoidant, and it's going to make them a lot more receptive to receiving your communication. Step number 4, you're gonna say, before I get into that, before I share with you, what I'm gonna take responsibility for, or for my part in this whole thing, you want to say, before I do that, I just wanna let you know that these are the things that I never got to acknowledge you for. And you want to actually acknowledge your dismissive avoidant for the things that you genuinely did not acknowledge them for. So let's say you wanted X, very specific needs met in your relationship, but because you were kind of hyper focused on getting those needs met, you overlooked all of these other ways that they showed up for you. Like maybe they were really stable or consistent, or maybe they were really generous with you. Actually look for the genuine things that they did in the relationship that were meaningful and that may have gone overlooked. This is going to be a really, really nice thing for the dismissive avoidant to hear, because again, dismissive avoidants are especially attuned to criticism. That is one thing that they're emotionally very attuned to, because more than likely they experienced a lot of that when they were very young. And as I've mentioned before, a lot of times what they were rewarded for was their performance. So a lot of their positive feelings are actually attached to the way that they perform and the good things that they do in the world. And quite frankly, anytime you can acknowledge someone, it's just a really good thing for someone to hear, especially when you mean it, and especially when you're trying to make amends. Now, this is also important because we're about to share with them the things that we're taking responsibility for. That means we're going to go back in time and talk about things that may have been painful for them. So framing this letter and talking about what they did well and what you wish that you would have acknowledged them for is going to be a really kind of important layer before you get into the stuff that's probably a little bit difficult to talk about. The next step is taking responsibility for your role in the relationship. Now, an apology may be warranted if you actually did something or said something that was really, wrong, or that you feel really bad for, but dismissive avoidants are especially receptive to responsibility. And the reason I say this is because dismissive avoidants are generally very responsible in their life. They're responsible at their job. They often really value their career and showing up consistently. They can be very loyal to their friends and to their family. Their loyalty is kind of ironclad. So if you can take responsibility, not just apologize, but can take responsibility for things that you didn't, for ways that you didn't show up in the relationship. For instance, if you can take responsibility for any uncommunicated expectations that you made of them that they could have never possibly met without you having to tell them, or if there were ways that you didn't show up for your dismissive avoidant in action and now you can take responsibility for those things. Or if you take responsibility for being critical and not seeing the positive attributes, those are things that I think will land really, really well with your dismissive avoidant. Now, of course, when you do this and all of the steps that I've mentioned so far, they truly have to be genuine. You really have to mean it. This can't be some kind of manipulation to get them back. And especially if you actually didn't do anything wrong in the relationship, because if you come in trying to take responsibility for things that really weren't your fault, it's just gonna look like groveling, and it's not going to be authentic. And your dismissive avoidant is going to see through that. So be sure that when you use these steps that it actually is true to you and it's something that you genuinely want to do, and that this video is more of like a guideline for you to take action on what you already want to do. Now, the final step to this email or to this letter is to leave the door open for communication. You could say something like, thanks for hearing me out. I'd love the possibility to connect and talk about this by phone or in person once you've had a chance to process what I'm sharing, or I'd just love to hear back from you when you're ready. So you're really allowing them the space to respond on their terms. And I think this is a really important thing to when doing this with a dismissive avoidant, is you really want to give them the space to kind of lean in after they've read this really heartfelt communication from you. I hope that you enjoyed these tips. If you feel like this is the kind of communication that you want to make to a dismissive avoidant and you want to review a letter that you've written or come up with a game plan of what to say to your dismissive avoidant ex in a letter like this, then definitely book a session with me and we can actually go through that process together. So you can do that in the description below. Did you like this video? If you did, give me a thumbs up if you found these tips to be helpful and hopefully practical. And if you want to watch more videos on the dismissive avoidant, if you want to learn what's going through their heads after a breakup, then definitely subscribe to my channel. Next up is my video on the dismissive avoidant, if you really want to know if they're stringing you along. So definitely check that out next. That's going to be right up here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.